Hello and welcome to the Alchemist Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people, like really grounded, like trying.
Yeah. We are recording this like 2 days before we leave for Egypt.
Yeah. So I'm leaving
Um,
for Egypt the day after tomorrow.
and I leave the day after that.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Yeah. So we are on our way. I just finished, to anybody who happens to listen to this before you get to Egypt, if you are traveling with us, I just finished doing a magical spell incantation on some crystals to give us safety and clarity. And it's called Way Be Clear. And it was drawn from Egyptian magic and prosperity work. And I'm very excited about it. I got to put all the crystals together today and pack them. And they have like all the names of everybody are in there. So you can accept it if you want to, or you don't have to, because magic also requires consent. And I'll say that louder for the people in the back if you want me to. But it's very important.
hmm Yeah. I'm so excited about that. It's going to be so cool. We also have other surprises for our Egypt travelers, which we will talk about when we return, and you guys will hear about on the podcast when we return. But I don't want to spoil those surprises just yet either. Um, but partly because I'm still really hoping that it makes it through customs. It's kind of weird, and I hope customs is all good with it.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, it's so the reason we're sharing that is because we're both kind of like, okay, is everything good? Are we good? I think we're good. Like, are we all packed? And so we're a little bit out in the stratosphere. Plus, we have some big stuff coming up. Um, this month that we're going to be talking about on here. And the first, like the topic of this episode is the Aries ingress, which Krista has extensively studied and done so much work on. And I've just looked
Breathing.
at and been like, what do you look like to me? So flipping disbursement comes to the
Oh,
energy output there. But yeah, Krista's done so much research, and I just want to say, like, thank you. It's really, really valuable. It's super duper cool. And I know you could talk for hours on it because of this, because it's a deal thing. Like it's not small. Um, plus we have the equinox as well. That's also happening
yeah.
right
So
around the
I,
same time.
yeah, the Aries ingress is the equinox. And I've also been studying the first eclipse, which is the Libra eclipse.
Right.
I have also been studying the Aries eclipse, which happens in April, but I have not produced any content on that yet because my mentor and I are studying it until the last minute so that we can see everything that happens leading up to it so we can get more specific as much as possible. And I do work with my mentor for the purpose of peer review so that I know that I'm staying true to the sources, to the people who are listening, and to the integrity of astrology. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And that's all the way in April, which is like a year from
Yeah,
now. So we're
that's
good.
forever away. You would think. I will actually be chasing it. So I've done storm
hmm
chasing before, which to me is like you would think it would be harder, but at least when the
hmm
storm shows up, you're like, cool, we know where it is. We're going to chase it. This eclipse, it's going to be like the eclipse is happening. Can you find a gap in the clouds in the Northeast in the spring? So
hmm
that's going to be fun. Right now, we're aiming to start in Ohio, and we may have to head like through Erie, Pennsylvania, up into New York. And I have to drive home that day. So it'll be really fun. But just bring the Nintendo.
I mean, bring the Nintendo. Also, like, do some like cloud bursting stuff. Bug
Well,
your guides to change the weather. Like,
I've been told that I have like because of certain things about me that this one person identified. They were like, if you have these traits, you're a weather mage, and I'm like, wait, then I'm a weather mage. How does that work? um, so there's been so much rain here
interesting.
the last couple days, and I was like, rain, go away. Apparently, I'm a weather mage. It didn't work, so I'm still fine tuning that one.
Fair.
If anybody has any really reliable resources on weather magic, I would love to research that. We all know I'm going to research stuff. So,
Yeah. I know there's a theta healing course on weather magic.
yeah. Yeah. Maybe I
I
should go back
don't,
to my books on that one and see.
yeah. I mean, I took it,
She,
I read it so long ago,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
10
I
years
have
now
all
or
of them.
12 years now. It's a long time ago. Um, but
Just
yeah,
command the storm away. But
right.
if the land needs the storm, you can't. So like you can't
hmm
trump the greater conditions, which
Correct.
is always like, well, it didn't work because someone else needed it then. Um,
hmm
which is true, but also feels like a little bit of an excuse.
but you can part the clouds in a little circle so
Yeah,
you can see what you need to see. No
I
one's going to
did do
need
that.
that one spot.
I did do that for the Great Conjunction when it happened
Hmm.
of Saturn and Jupiter in 2020. We were able to see it because the clouds parted just enough. So yeah, I
Side
just
note, part of the reason Krista's chasing this eclipse is because it also comes with a comet, which again,
yeah,
we will be talking about.
it's big omen energy, okay? So
It's like one of those life-changing, like the ancient people would be like, is this end of days?
yeah,
We don't know.
I don't think Ptolemy meant together when he put them next to each other in chapters in his book.
No, I don't think so either. Oh, awesome. Okay, well, let's talk about stuff we actually wanted to talk about, which is the Equinox Aries ingress. Like we got we got big energy over the next 4 weeks plus. I'd say maybe 6 weeks. The energy is all right. Please don't get freaked out by me saying this, but I'm going to call it cataclysmic positively.
How about catalytic?
It is catalytic, but it's too much crashing together.
Okay, ionizing?
Ionizing. Okay, I'll go with ionizing. I will say, I mean, it is catalytic energy. Absolutely. It
Yeah.
totally is. But looking at the energy of it, I'm like, it's like if a cataclysmic event was in our highest and best and it didn't like, it doesn't look negative if you can put that in a positive context because it does feel beneficial.
Yeah.
Um, it's a lot though. So,
Yeah.
stuff. What's going on?
So I want to just emphasize that sometimes destruction isn't bad.
Yeah.
Think about feminine rage. Is that
Hmm.
always bad? So thinking about that, but I have a quote that I put in my As Above, So Below newsletter that will come out in 2 weeks. For those of you who are on my free Patreon tier, this is a preview of what you're going to get in 2 weeks, where we actually analyze the chart together in there too. I'm very pleased with this. It's very like astrology mentorship vibe. So I hope that you're interested in that. But Picatrix, which is a Picatrix, if you're watching on the video, is this guy right here. It's a big deal grimoire for the astrological magicians. I studied under the guy who translated this version of it when I learned to be an astrological magician or an astromage or however we call ourselves these days. And Picatrix actually does caution against magic during eclipses by saying that things are destroyed and things suffer change, receiving benefits from good qualities and harm from bad ones. So I just wanted to say that, like, just because something is cataclysmic doesn't mean that you're not receiving benefits from the good qualities, as Picatrix likes to say. Yeah.
See, exactly.
Yeah.
It's that. I'm like, it doesn't feel where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be terrible and like, oh, it's like everything's exploding. But it does feel violently progressive.
Mhm. Feels like oomph, um,
Uh-huh.
which is totally correct for Aries season, right? Like the sun comes into Aries where the sun is exalted. First and foremost, we're like, yay, sun is exalted. Awesome. Now, when we look at the actual Aries ingress chart for the year, the sun is exalted, but is also in the sixth house. Um, and I could
Hmm.
go into, again, I have a whole 45-minute video that will be posted to the Patreon. It is for
Hmm.
patrons because I'm not going to put it on YouTube because it's so in depth. I'm going to put it just for them as like this little gem. But there is a quote of the sun in the sixth, kind of giving grievances
Hmm.
because the sun in the sixth is in a cadent house, not really doing its best there. So we see the sun in the sixth, which is showing the leadership. The sun
Yeah.
in the chart and the ruler of the 10th in the chart, which is the same in this case because it's a 10th house Leo. They are both the ruler of the 10th and the sun are indicators of the ruler of the nation that you are casting the chart for. I cast my chart for Washington, D.C. to try and represent America, the United States specifically. That's rough because America is massive. Truly, we should be setting it for like the capital of each city and casting a chart for each state. I correct myself, for each state to see how it's going to be there because we
Hmm.
have literally so much time difference between one end to the other end, so much cultural difference, resource
Yeah.
difference. Like it's a lot. Um,
I was
but
actually showing my kids on that note, just really quick.
yeah, yeah.
Um, it's hard to understand, especially when you live in the US, because our propaganda is fucking sound, to understand how much bigger we are than other things in the world. And also how much smaller we are than other places in the world. Like, for example, like Indonesia, just the islands are pretty much as big as us. Like, they're freaking huge. But beside the point. But I was trying to explain that to my kids so that they have a grander perspective on like world scale,
Mhm.
especially because we keep going on these trips and stuff. And I mentioned, like, oh, we it's only like a 2-hour flight from Italy to Cairo, which is what one of the legs of our flight is. And one of my kids was like, well, but wait a second, that's like to Arizona. Like that's like like what are you talking? Like it's that close? And I'm like, yeah. So I was looking at perspective maps of the US prospectively over different things with my
Oh,
kids. And there's this tool, I forget what the website is, but you can move the map over the globe and it actually expands it based on the poles as well. So it like distorts the shape of it because it's actually how it would look on different land spaces. So you get it over like if you put it up over Russia, like the top of the country expands and the bottom like narrows because that's the way that the perspective actually is, even though we flatten
mhm.
it out. It's really fascinating. We're like 2 times the size of Europe, which is wild, especially when you have the actual perspective map tool
Mhm.
to look at it. So just to throw that in there too, as far as talking about massive, we're so large and we
Yeah.
don't like even like conceptualizing it as a person, I'm like, oh, okay. Well, the countries in Europe are smaller than our states by a lot, like
By
by
a
a
lot.
lot, a lot. And
Mhm.
so it's just you're very right. Like everything, especially I don't know. I mean, I'm not an astrologer, of course, but I know that the energy deeply changes depending upon where you are on this massive, absolutely massive country.
Yeah, especially when you get into things, not necessarily for the Aries ingress, but when we move on in the next episode to the eclipses, the
Hmm.
visibility of the eclipse from the location you're at matters. And there's going to
Hmm.
be a portion of the United States where it is visible. There's going to be a portion of the United States where it is not. And you're going to
Yep.
say that, casting this one chart for the capital of the nation, as we've designated it, is going to speak for the whole nation. In this case, possibly not.
Yeah.
But we do our best because news travels
Hmm.
fast, at least. So we
Yeah.
will all hear about it. One of the things that they didn't anticipate in ancient times was how much we would know about our neighboring nations or how much we would be able to very quickly share information. So I think
Hmm.
that in a way that kind of compensates in a sense. But by the traditional like guidelines, it is a bit of a workaround that we have to do. And I will say when I look into the Lord of the Year for this chart, because that's one of the first things you do is you say, just like when you look at a natal chart, you're like, well, who runs this chart? Who's the helmsman? Who rules the ascendant? There
Hmm.
are so many criteria you could delve into to find the Lord of the Year of a chart. It could be the ruler of the ascendant, and ideally it would be. Um, this time it does happen to be not just because he's the Lord of the Ascendant, but also because he's got the most to say in the chart. And I'm giving kind of hints on that even just by naming the gender binary of the planet. But this time it is a Scorpio rising chart. Shout out to all my fellow Scorpio risings out there. We might feel just at home this year. Speaking of cataclysmic, right? Scorpio
Yeah.
brings a lot of transformation and change. But to speak to that, the ruler of that is Mars, who is conjunct the IC of homeland and home and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
The focus of that, which is in Aquarius. So when we think about, I mentioned the king being represented by the ruler of the 10th and the sun is in the sixth. That is about infirmities and health issues and things. And not necessarily to like make a solid prediction on that, but what are the primary headlines right now for the people that we are deciding whether or not we'll be quote unquote king or ruler, right?
Right.
It's very much like, are they well enough to be in this position? So you can already see the chart saying, yeah, that's going to be the topic is their ability to physically maintain this position. Um, but
Yeah.
the
Short answer, no. All of our government is ancient.
yeah, short answer is I have
Regardless
thoughts
of
on that.
energy stuff, they're all too fucking old. I'm gonna throw
Yeah,
that in there.
it's a lot. As I say in my video, I have opinions on this, but when it comes to astrology, I try to remove myself as much as I can, which is hard. If you want to hear
Yeah.
my opinions on things, you're best turning off a camera and letting me rant because I will do that. In this
Yeah.
case, though, it's absolutely there that health is the focus of
Hmm.
the candidates that we have right now for the focus of
Thank
who gets to run the show. When we look at Mars, the ruler of the ascendant, being one of the indicators of the people for the year, and the moon being a general indicator for the people, this is where it gets interesting to me because Mars, again, is on the IC and it's Mars, people in conflict or people challenging things or people feeling aggravated or attacked about things,
hmm
and it's near that homeland area where it's the base of the chart, the bottom, the roots. We would consider this your upbringing or your homestead in a natal chart. And so it's the homeland in
hmm
a mundane chart. And this Mars is actually by whole sign opposite the moon in Leo. You might remember I mentioned Leo as the 10th house, the place of rulership in the king. So the people are in the position of, the king's place, which means that the focus of the people for the year is on who gets to fill the role of king or president in our case, in our time and era. So the chart is saying, hey guys, guess what? It's an election year. And we're all like, yep, it is.
hmm
Again, I go into further detail and sources and quotes from texts like Abu Mashar, Masha Allah, Ptolemy, William Ramsey, all of those guys in my 45-minute long video. Here, I want to keep it a little bit more brief, but we can tell it's an election year. We can tell health is an issue for a lot of people when it comes to the viability of the person who we elect. We can tell that the definition of America in my video, I compare this chart to America's chart as a birth chart. And there's
hmm
some reflection happening here. When we think about our definition, which we've seen in the headlines already, what does democracy mean to me? And what does it mean to people across the board? That definition is pretty flexible right now. Some people, many people are deciding what they think it means, and that's going to educate how they decide to make their choices come election time. And then we think about transiting things, which around the fall, Mars has some transits that are going to be very interesting as well, right around that time of the election. So I think this chart really emphasizes that the year builds up to that election, and that time around that election shows that a lot's going on, and that we're going through a change and sort of
hmm
a coming of redefinition as a people in this
That
country.
is a gentle way. A coming of redefinition.
I'm so
I
good.
love that. That was good. That was good. I
I'm nothing
I
if not
have
diplomatic,
been
okay?
privately, we have predicted some serious for years. I think it's been 3 years we've been watching this and talking about this. Some serious redefinition coming. So it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah,
But it does feel like the true start of that.
yeah. And there is some
It's very, I do
astrology.
just, yeah. I was
Sorry,
just gonna say, I do just want to highlight like a lot of the stuff that we predict and stuff we don't necessarily share publicly. But most of the time, by the time we share a prediction publicly, Krista and I have workshopped that prediction for literally years. Like the things that we're currently predicting are for like 2026, 2027 with each other privately. Because we've already completely built, like we know what's going on this year in our prediction space. We know what's going on for most of next year in our prediction space. Like it's very, very, so just know that whenever we do bring a prediction forward to you, whether we speak it on the podcast or you see it on our content, it's not off the cuff at all.
Yeah. And there is astrology and there are intuitive pings. I talk about this with my amazing astrological mentor, respects my intuition a lot. So she'll
Mhm.
ask me intuitively, what do you feel around this? And, how do we support that with the astrology? Which I love because evidence to
That's
the
cool.
intuition. Amazing. But I ended up saying, like, accidentally blurting something intuitively about something we were looking at. It has not come to pass yet, and it won't until probably the summer. And I won't share that because, again, this is like magical consent. There is
Mhm.
astrological consent. People are
Yeah.
entitled to their own experience. They are entitled to experience the world in their time, which doesn't always
Yeah.
mean that you put something into their heads and make them think a certain way before they get to decide for themselves. So the
Mhm.
reason I try to be so diplomatic is because in my life purpose with my exalted Jupiter in the ninth, I am here to contribute to everybody's research, to thinking for themselves in a wise and educated way, because Saturn is opposite that Jupiter. Um, but I'm not here to tell them what to think. And so I do my very, very best, and I know you do too, Em, of just
Yeah.
making sure you have all the context you need to make educated decisions about what you believe and to discover what those things mean to you. So again, that's what the year is showing. What you do within that, what you do around that, what you do with this information, that is entirely up to you. And whatever you choose, as long as it is in alignment with you and your ideals and feels right to you, I trust that it's going to be the right thing. And
Mhm.
I'm glad you're here because that kind of shows that you are pursuing truth and you are pursuing.
Yeah.
So it also makes me trust you more.
And I also just like on that note too, I think it's important. That's part of the reason neither of us really like doing future sight for people.
Mhm.
Because again, it covers your understanding of the future. So you don't get to experience it and process it with your own thoughts and feelings and pings. And instead gives you a flavor that you're already experiencing it through, which isn't always the best thing. Like it's not always the greatest. So what we try to do is we'll look at it and be like, these are the energy trends. This is what the energy looks like. Here's how
Curate
you can be the
it.
most prepared.
Yep.
That's it. So that's why if you're ever wondering, like, just tell us what it's going to be, we're not going to. I mean, maybe if you're in one of our groups or something and you specifically ask on a call, I'll occasionally give like my patrons more specific updates and things like that. But it's not something we do generally and publicly, not because we think we're wrong. The opposite. It's because we know we're right, and that can be very
We're
jarring.
not going to Teresa Caputo you here on a
Yeah.
podcast where you may be listening for the first time. And now we're
Mm-hmm.
coming out of nowhere without your consent and telling you something that's going to radically shake you. No,
Mm-hmm.
I will say that for the people who come specifically to me for that. And I know that because I've created the spaces for them to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 So just to highlight that, because I think that was an important point that you made about it in general.
Yeah.
I will also say, so Aries season's always rough for me. It's
Yeah.
always rough for me. April in general as a month, and obviously that's 2 seasons, but April in general as a month is brutal for me every single year. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad brutal. Sometimes it's just tons of stuff happening. Sometimes it's a lot of new information. Sometimes it's like, hey, guess what? You're going to pivot 6 times. It's fun, and it's not fun. But it's but the equinox is always lovely. It is like a really lovely energy to get it kicked off on. I don't know what it is about it because it enters into like one of the worst seasons of the year for me, but something about the spring equinox is always just it's really, really refreshing. It's really comforting in a lot of ways. And this book looks like that too, even though it has a lot of this energy. I'm like, looking at it, I'm like, it still feels nice.
Venus is still exalted, and so is the sun. Venus is
Hmm.
in her joy. Venus, she's approaching that conjunction with Saturn. I have hopeful predictions for that conjunction with Saturn that I've shared, I think, in my Patreon, because some people know why I've been tracking Venus specifically. But she
Hmm.
is already, by the time you hear this episode, she is already in her exaltation in Pisces, bringing peace to relationships and soothing burns and that kind of thing. So that's definitely something to set the tone for the year. Yay. Compared to how she was doing in last year's ingress charts that we had
Hmm.
last year, because of the rising sign, we had to use both the Aries ingress and the Libra ingress to get the idea for the condition of the year because it was a little bit more on the wonky, changeable side. There's
Hmm.
criteria you have to meet in order to only use one chart, fixed sign, one chart. We have that this year. So yay, I only had to study one chart. Um, but Venus is doing well. She's still again applying to Saturn, so we'll see what that
Hmm.
brings as far as for America goes. If Venus represents people who are at least assigned feminine at birth or identify
Hmm.
as female, those things may be another topic, but at least she's strong and exalted. She's getting the recognition she deserves, and hopefully that shows up in a more of a literal sense.
Yeah, she's preening,
Yeah.
and that's nice.
I do see a lot of indications of more what my mentor and I figured could be more things surrounding the Supreme Court.
Hmm.
But again, those can be positive too. They just have been exhausting recently. So it's kind of been giving the reputation. Um, I'm
Yeah. Ugh.
so
Oh,
sorry.
I
I
know.
want to get
It's
good news. I really try.
you know, I feel so bad too, because especially the last couple weeks, as many of you have been watching my like energy forecast for the week. I'm like, hey. Be safe out there. This is a little scary, but you'll make it because it's not been, I mean, it's not been bad, but it certainly has not been chill either.
Yeah.
And this, I mean, speaking more about this week specifically, which we can kind of narrow in on because the technically the Aries Ingress is next
It's
week.
19th.
Yeah. So that is kind of this week, next week. But obviously all of this stuff is changing. We're hitting that equinox point. We're having these shifts come up. Also, this week is it's good, it's focused, but it's a lot of energy. It's like when you take a drink and you actually take too big of a drink and you're like, oh, that kind of hurt my chest a little bit, but it was fine. That's how the energy kind of looks this week.
I love that. That is such a specific feeling. And a yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Like, how can I describe it? Because
Yeah.
that's what it's also like your eyes are bigger than your stomach vibes, right? Like you
Mhm.
get a plate of food and you're like, I can totally eat all this. And you look at it after like 5 minutes, like, never mind. I
Yep.
can't.
Or
It
like
doesn't make
if
it
I put enough
bad. It's
spice
just a
on it, it'll
lot.
speed up my metabolism.
Right? Yeah, it's just a lot. It's just a lot of food. It's just a lot of drink. It's what like we get a lot of energy this week. And so digest it however feels best for you to digest it and play with. I will also say it's always a nice like pay attention to your dreams this week. They're already popping off for everybody. But it's only going to get more the closer we get to the equinox energy. Equinox solstice, the dream stuff just gets really intense. And we have talked about this a whole bunch, but I'm going to reiterate it. Spiritual stuff is increasing. It's increasing at a rapid rate. We kind of hit a little bit of a tipping point in the planetary vibration a little while ago. It was really funny because, like, pretty much the same day, I was like, oh, I think we hit that kind of tipping point where, like, we're now full speed ahead into like spiritual stuff becoming everyday reality stuff. Um, Rebecca Jane posted in her Patreon a big thing of like, hey, the timelines are merging and we have all this stuff happening. It feels like we hit a tipping point. I'm like, hey, validation, because I really think we have in a lot of ways. So spiritual stuff is just going to keep really, really quickly increasing as well. So especially this year with us kind of past that tipping point sort of energy, the dreams, the spiritual pressures, the different spiritual things are going to be even more prominent on these very prominent astrologically important days because everything on planet is affected by the stars,
Mhm.
all of it, which includes the stuff we can't see.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, and that's honestly shameless plug here. It's one of the reasons why I'm really glad all summer long we have Deity Academy
I
because for
know, me
these
too.
things that are going on, the people there and us with them, we have this space of people we can talk to. We have a group where we can all share what's going on and say, hey, my spiritual stuff is expanding and
Mm-hmm.
what to do with it. Like Deity Academy's whole thing is what to do with it, how to tune into it more, how to spiritually explore your bounds
Yeah.
and the things that are kind of calling out to you. So I think that's a really nice thing. The timing of that is even better than I thought it was,
Mm-hmm.
considering. And
Yeah.
by the way, there are still spots open in that. So if you are interested in that, D8 Academy is on the Forgotten Storytellers website. You can check it out there. We do
Mm-hmm.
still have spots open. We're going to be exploring different DD connections with resources, with practice all summer. And there is a group for support. So you'll be able to make a lot of friends who will understand what you're saying when you're like, why are the timelines converging? Or why is this spiritual thing happening more? We get it.
Mm-hmm.
We're there and you don't have to be there alone.
Yeah, the cool thing about D&D Academy, so each month we're going to focus on channeling in a different pantheon, and we're going to give you tools and tips on how to channel. We're going to give you resources on how to channel, and then we focus on the deities of that pantheon for that month, and then we do a channeling call where you get to see Krista and I kind of channeling in action, which most people don't get to see. To be totally honest, when we get into modes of channeling deity stuff for each other, it's an adventure and an experience for us. It's very normal, but we recently realized well, that's what D&D Academy is. But the cool thing is we're actually starting off with the Egyptian pantheon for the month of April. So when you join D&D Academy, again, we're going to go through 4 different pantheons. We're starting off with the Egyptian pantheon. So we're going to get to channel in the deities that we went to the temples of just a little bit before. So you get to have that experience with us, which is going to be it's going to be really cool. I'm really excited about it. And it gives you tools to ask the gods what the heck is going on. And they will tell you a lot of the time. Sometimes they're not particularly forthcoming, but oftentimes they will be like, "Well, this is what's going on," whether or not you're super comfortable with being like, "I want to know everything," and they'll just be like, "Oh, here, this is what's happening," and then you have to readjust your whole worldview based on what they said, which happens very often. Which is
Mhm.
also the point of doing this in a group, so that you can be like, "Hey, like I just got this massive download from this deity. They said it nonchalantly. What does it mean? How do I figure this out?" And you can kind of bounce that off of everyone in the group space. So it's going to be really cool. I'm really excited for it as well. Thank you for bringing that up. We do still have some spaces. We don't have a ton of spaces left, though. I'm just going to throw that in there. We have some spaces, but we're well over half full. So, um, yeah, go ahead and hop on in there if you want. And again, we start in April.
Mhm. Yeah, we already have conversation going now, and the
Yeah.
resource list will be posted soon for the first Pantheon. But
Hmm.
I'm having so much fun doing research for like the best resources. It's been fun.
Yeah. And I will say it's not resources. We're not going to be like this textbook. The resources that we're
There
sharing
we
with
go.
our deity, there may be some, but like the deity academy resources that we're sharing, some will be like traditional resource sources, books on that pantheon, books on, the hymns of that pantheon, whatever the magic of that pantheon, that sort of thing, but also YouTube videos,
Interactive
um,
museum websites, which
interactive
is
museum
really cool
websites,
find.
fictional books, lots of that, fictional television shows. Like we're going to include a lot of different types of research and resources you can do because we're trying to immerse you in the energy of that pantheon, not specifically get you to present an academic paper on the topic. So it's going to be more of like, how can we get you energetically aligned with this pantheon and give you an understanding of the different deities and kind of core themes and myths without you feeling burdened and overwhelmed, so you can really tap in and start talking to them. So I'm excited about it. We have
All right,
such a long
added.
list for each
I just thought
pantheon too.
about one for Egypt, and I was like, "Oh, we could do that one," and it's a TV show, so it's really easy.
See, there
Yep,
we go. So anyway, it's gonna be really fun. It's a very neat adventure, and I'm really excited about it. So it's gonna be
agreed.
great. But yeah, things are changing and they're changing really rapidly. Obviously, we are feeling that in our physical reality. Things are shifting very quickly in physical reality amongst collective and amongst systems of collective, but also in the spiritual reality, things are shifting really quickly as well. So just to pay attention to both.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
what I would recommend to someone this year where they're like, "Wow, a lot's happening this year. What am I supposed to do about it?" It would be to know why you believe what you believe and
Hmm.
to also be open to other people being different, and that's so okay. Like, you can be so firm in what you believe, and that will be correct, and then someone can believe something a little bit differently, but the truth underlying is the same. One of the
Hmm.
things I always recognize, as I study multiple religions, as we study these pantheons, you're going to find there's an underlying seam of sameness. And then
Hmm.
there's different expressions that kind of branch off of it from there, kind of like the timeline in the Loki series. um, but that's good. That's true. That's okay, and it's allowed, and it's acceptable. So you don't have to be wrong just because someone else seems correct, and they don't have to be wrong just because you feel correct. We can have all of it. We have a very fixed looking chart for the year that is Scorpio, that is emotional. And there's some intuitive, like, what do I believe here? How can I focus and fixate on what this means for me and my own kind of movements that I'm doing?
Hmm.
But also that Mars, which rules it, is in Aquarius, which is fixed, and Mars is moving just fine and direct and all those things. So Mars is going to be noticeably able to enact these actions, and if you are part of that, which you are, you can be noticeably able to contribute to your society, to contribute to what feels Aquarian to you, which is idyllic or idyllic, can be
Hmm.
your ideals, can be humanitarian if you choose to let it. Aquarius is
Yeah.
interesting because there's authoritarian and humanitarian. You have to pick
Hmm.
which one you decide becomes the actual definition there. And so if enough of us choose humanitarian, we get a good year.
Scorpio to me always is like you feel it, but you feel it
Mhm.
with purpose and direction. Like you feel it, but you know what it's doing.
You
And so
feel it in the
like,
deepest way.
yeah, you feel it in the deepest way that is it clarifies things. It
Mhm.
removes the excess and you can see to the heart of the matter.
Mhm.
That's how Scorpio, I mean, meeting with the Scorpio moon, all I have to do is feel my feely feelings all the time.
Yeah, I feel like the most involuntary Scorpio moon I could possibly be because they're on my ascendant with I really do think Pluto exacerbates that. Um,
Yeah, well, I'm
but
sure
yeah,
it does. That speaks to each other so nicely.
yeah.
Um, but I will say, like, just from my experience with, having a very intimate connection with Scorpio, it's well, what's that song? It's called Labor. That's the name
Hmm,
of the song.
funny.
Um, and it's divine feminine rage in the purest cut
Yes.
form in that song. So I highly recommend. Who sings it? Hold on, now I got to look it up.
Yeah,
But I
no
highly
worries.
recommend going to listen to that if you want to understand how Scorpio feels in that way. It is a very, very Scorpio song of like expressing. Oh gosh, now I need to find the name of it. I'm going to.
So another thing to think about with Scorpio, because
Paris
people are like,
Paloma.
oh, go
Paris
ahead.
Paloma is the name of the person who sings the song. I'll highly recommend it
Yeah.
if you
I
want to
like to say
understand.
that Scorpio does feel their feelings. People say that Scorpio is secretive about it, but really, Scorpio feels their feelings. They just don't know if you can handle them talking about it. Like it might make
Mhm.
other people uncomfortable to hear how deep their feelings are. I've asked a
Yeah.
couple other Scorpio moons if that's how they feel, and they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "I know,
Hmm.
get it. That's
It's
why
the
I'm."
magma that's in the earth, not the explosion of lava coming out.
Yeah. So the Scorpio is the magma. The volcanic eruption is the Aries. They're both
Hmm.
Mars.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Neither. Oh, Mars.
Oh.
I'm happy Venus is exalted. Let's just say that.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, Mars is going to creep into Pisces in the week within the week of this airing. Mars is coming into Pisces as well. I just recorded the skit for that a little bit ago of just Venus
Yeah.
being like, "Yay, I'm exalted in Pisces and no one's here to ruin it for me." And everybody else is like, "Except just let her have this moment." Because
Oh.
I
No.
mean, he doesn't catch up to her. She is moving away from him now. So
Good.
she's going to outpace both malefics by the time we reach that eclipse on the 25th.
Seriously, give her some space from that toxic relationship, man.
I know.
It's like,
I know. Makes some interesting charts though when you see people who have a Venus Mars conjunction in their charts. My
oh,
niece
I
has
bet.
one of that, but so does Zendaya.
Hmm,
Yeah. So you can
interesting.
see kind of a Venus Mars conjunction at work
Hmm.
there a little bit. It's a
Yeah,
good.
intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, awesome.
I went
Well,
off a little bit, but
we never stay on topic. What are you talking about?
I don't know.
We just go. Honestly, if you're looking to celebrate or do things to honor the equinox energy, what I always recommend, connecting with nature in some way is always going to benefit you. I'm really hoping our hotel has bathtub because I will take a bath most likely during that time, especially if you can take a bath that has like herbs in it or a fun bath bomb or salts or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, do it. It will really, really help. Journaling, especially stream of consciousness journaling, really going to help if you can just do some channeled writing or just literally just like set a timer for 15 minutes and just like word vomit out onto a piece of paper. Really going to help as well. I'm actually bringing a journal to Egypt, which I don't usually bring journals when I'm traveling the same way Krista does.
I'm bringing two because I know that I'm going to finish the one I'm in, and I'm probably going to go through the whole. Barnes and Noble doesn't have thick journals anymore for less than like $50.
I
I
know.
went there and I'm like, I don't want genuine leather. I want a thick journal with a little pocket in the back. Like they have Paperworks journal. It's my
Yeah.
favorite. But they were all so expensive and in plastic and all this stuff. And it's like, I just want a good journal that has a lot of pages because I do a lot of writing.
I've been doing only my only buy my journals from Ross and TJ Maxx now because they
Fair.
have thick journals and there's a ton of them.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Except the one that I'm bringing actually Weston found. We were down. I was obsessively buying more yarn. Let's just be really clear. We were in Michael's. I was obsessively buying more yarn, um, which happens a lot now. By the way, I've made like 5 hedgehogs in the last week, and I made a stingray, and I'm working on a snake. Like I'm doing all sorts of shit. It's gonna be super fun. I think I'm gonna end up having a booth at Sacred Spaces where I just sell all of my crochet because I'm gonna keep making them, and I need them to like do something. So I think I'm gonna put like actual like intention and incantation and maybe even like packets of herbs inside of them
Mhm.
So they smell really nice. And then people can purchase them at sacred spaces because like I am not going to stop and I don't want this many stuffed animals around me.
So I
Anyway,
think I'm
I found
starting.
it. I was just gonna say I found a journal, or Weston found a journal, and it's velvet with a bee on the front. And I was
Perfect.
like, that's for me. Is it thick? No, but it's coming to Egypt.
Mhm.
Anyway,
A good one. I just realized that on the 19th, the day of the ingress, we will be at Karnak Temple
we will.
and Luxor Temple. And if I'm right, which I think I am, Karnak is one of the temples that's lined up with the equinoxes.
I think
Um,
you're right.
yeah, because I remember him showing us the pillars when we were there, and he's like, if it were the equinox, it was October. We'd be able to see the sunrise, and we're not going to be able to see the sunrise, but I should be able to show people the sun rose here, so now you can understand where the ecliptic is, because we'll be able to
Oh
see
yeah,
the sun aligned with it. So it won't be
yeah,
sunrise through the pillars, but it will be sun aligned with them just enough for us to be like, we were there.
yeah.
So that's
By the
really
way, if any of
hoping.
you are say that again, sorry.
I was just really hoping we'd be in Luxor for that. I'm stoked.
Yeah, we will. We definitely will. And it will be, I mean, it'll be pretty close to sunrise because the train, we're on a sleeper train. The train rolls in, we hop off, and we go straight to Karnak.
Yeah, I mean, it says 7:30 a.m.
Yeah,
So we're looking at probably right now, spring forward, right? Here,
yeah,
the sunrise is around 7:30. So
yeah.
it'll be close. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like if it's not right at sunrise, we're only gonna miss it by maybe 30 minutes.
Yep. Which we need
You
to
know,
just be
35.
aware that other people are probably going to be there too.
Potentially.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this afterwards. Anyway,
Okay.
I have a story on that.
All
Um,
right.
I was just gonna say, if anyone's wondering, like, oh man, I hope they do content on Egypt. We're going to produce so much content on this trip. It's gonna be a little ridiculous, I think. So
Mhm.
you're gonna get a lot of stuff from us. In all the platforms and places, including here, listening to the podcast. We're going to do it on our YouTubes. We're going to do it on the TikTok slash Instagrams. Like it's going to be a lot of stuff. It's going to be cool. But anyway, just wanted to throw that out there, being like, oh, yeah, I wish I could come, but I couldn't come. Are you going to show me? Yes, we're going to show you.
Yes, we're gonna be
Yeah.
there.
One of our
I'm not
favorite
gonna have
things to,
Dan, so I'm just my companion will be my phone. So you all will be my companions on this trip, and I will share a ton.
yeah. And we love going around and like just making reads on things and that sort of thing. So we're going to take you through a lot of that as well, which is going to be cool.
Gonna be great.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate each and every one of you. Happy equinox.
Happy equinox. It's
Happy
amazing.
equinox. Yeah. We hope that you enjoy this equinox energy and that you go make some
It's the
magic.
magic. It's
I don't know.
perfect on my end, and people on YouTube have been liking it. So
Okay. Then
I
I
think
am going to go with it was so perfect. It
it
was,
was
it
so
was,
good.
okay.